So I'm in my 30s, and I know there's a lot of people out there that have been watching wrestling for way longer than me. But I'm here to talk specifically about men or women in their 30s who kind of grew up watching wrestling and have seen it just evolve and go through all these incredible highs and lows throughout these 30 some years. I mean, it's really incredible when you think about it. I remember actually there being a point in time where kids at school, their parents wouldn't let them watch Monday Night Raw. I remember you'd have to be watching in your room secretly on Monday nights with your finger on the remote, just ready to change the channel if your parents walked in the room, like you were watching porn or something. Well, now that I think about it, during the height of the Attitude Era, that probably wasn't that far off, to be honest. So, for good reason, these kids were paranoid. But I remember that just being a thing. And I also remember wrestling was the coolest thing in the world. It was like this universal language between kids when I was going to elementary school. Everybody was into it. And this is dating back very far. Like I'm talking kindergarten. My friends, we'd all bring our little wrestling figures to class and we'd be jumping off our desks, in a garbage can match, stuff like that. I remember, I think wrestling action figures ended up getting banned from my kindergarten because so many kids were bringing these figures to school. And I remember it was cool to wear wrestling shirts to school. Like, it wasn't cringe or weird or looked down on. Like, if you were wearing an Austin 316 shirt, you were the coolest kid in the school back then. It's funny how things changed, because as I got older, I remember, towards middle school, it started to be way less cool to be into wrestling. And I remember being kind of, I don't want to say secretive, but I definitely wasn't as in your face as I used to be with my fandom. I wasn't wearing wrestling shirts to school like I used to be. I used to wear the John Cena wristbands, I remember, at one point to school. You guys ever done that? I was in it, man. I remember I had friends too who would wear the Jeff Hardy armbands to school. we were just crazily obsessed with wrestling. And I know it sounds cliche. Everybody says, oh, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. I've been a fan my entire life. Literally, my first memory in my head, my very first memory is watching my dad play WWF Warzone on the PS1. That's my first. Well, that's not true. That's actually my second memory. My very first memory is I was shitting blood and I told my mom I was pooping red and she took me to the hospital and I had to get something shoved up my ass to stop the bleeding. But that doesn't sound as cool as Warzone being my first. I digress. And it just never stopped since then. My love for wrestling, not the pooping blood, that stopped. I think that was a one-time thing. I have loved wrestling my entire life. And it's unfortunate in this regard. I was such a passionate fan growing up throughout the Attitude Era and even the Ruthless Aggression Era. And it was unfortunate to see the dip in the PG era and to see all my friends that I grew up loving this with. I mean, we played all the games. We played No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000, SmackDown 1 and 2 on the PS1. That was our life after school. We would talk about wrestling. We would watch wrestling. We would trade wrestling figures. We'd play the wrestling games. And then around 2008, 2009, all my friends, one by one, started to fade away. And can you blame them? I mean, the product was really horrendous at that point in time. And you can point fingers to a lot of things. The roster was really the roster was in a weird place during that time period because you still had guys like Triple H, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, John Cena, Batista. But you know what it was? The mid card and like those fun storylines, they just weren't there anymore. The Eddie Guerrero in China, that was such a cool mid-card storyline, stuff like that. Back in the Attitude Era, everybody had a story. Mark Henry, Mae Young, the hardcore title itself was a storyline for everybody else. It gave guys like Crash Holly and Al Snow and Bob Holly, it gave all these guys something, you were excited to see them. All the entrances were top notch. People like The Godfather, you were excited to see. The Rights to Censor, I mean, you heard the siren for their entrance, and boo. They the Rights to Censor was such, it's like perfectly encapsulates the Attitude Era, you know, because it's like they were some of the biggest heels, and all they wanted was to like censor, obviously, the nudity and the violence that was happening on TV. You know, and the best bad guys, they say in movies, the best bad guys are the ones that believe that they're doing right. So rights to censor, that's just funny. Yeah, Stevie Richards and Ivory, all these wrestlers just, they always had something to do. And then as the years went on in 2008, 2009, it was just all about the world titles pretty much. And everything else kind of got put on the back burner, it felt like. And, you know, the storylines were just not as compelling. It didn't feel as edgy. It wasn't as cool. It got really cartoony, I think is one of the big things. And you can attribute that, like I said, to the writing. I think Michael Cole and King being the lead commentary team on Raw was also a big hit. I mean, Jim Ross, for so long we grew up, he was the voice of the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era. And, you know, him being replaced with Michael Cole, and then having Michael Cole be a heel. And there's just lame stuff with, like, the anonymous general manager, and it wasn't a fun watch anymore. But that being said, I never stopped watching. I always kept an eye. Even when I kept it on the down low, I still was always watching. At the very least, I was like keeping up with highlights and reading the rumor mill online, the dirt sheets. I was still a member of forums online. I was always talking about wrestling. I never stopped playing the games, obviously, because you can make your own stories within those. And yeah, that sucked, seeing all my friends kind of fade away from wrestling while I remained. And then something cool happened around high school. Towards the end of high school, rather, I should say. The product started getting cool again. And I started to get friends that would ask me about it, like, hey, that I hadn't talked to about wrestling in years. They would be like, hey, have you been paying attention to Raw? Do you see what happened with CM Punk cutting that promo and getting cut off the air, getting his mic cut? That's what it was for me. I don't know about you guys, but what got a lot of my friends back into it was that time period. For others, it was like the Nexus invasion, and regardless of how you feel about that storyline and its ending and how it kind of fizzled out, when they first came onto the scene, the Nexus, that was interesting. In 2011, the pipe bomb, that got a lot of people. It piqued a lot of interest. I remember going to a live Raw shortly after that happened. I was at like just a couple weeks after the pipe bomb, I attended a Raw with some friends, some old friends that I used to talk about wrestling with. We got back into it, and we got really back into it. We started having watch parties every week, and of course, a couple years later, The Shield came on the scene, and then you had the whole ascent of Daniel Bryan. So we were peaking during the Attitude Era, and then we hit a valley, and then we started to come back. And wrestling was really fun up until about, I want to say 2016, and then it took another dip. And then Cody Rhodes comes back, like 8 years later or whatever, and we ascend again. And then it culminated probably in WrestleMania 41, and now we've kind of been on a little bit of a dip, in my opinion, again. But that's what I wanted to talk about, I guess, in this video, is just seeing, and this is over like decades, seeing the rise and fall of popularity in wrestling while you yourself always continue to love it is really interesting. You know, it's crazy. I never would have thought as a kid that you could just like go into a Walmart and buy a wrestling shirt. You know? Same thing with anime, by the way. This is not a video on anime, but it'll never not be wild to me that you can just go to any Target and buy a Naruto shirt. You know, you had to like scour the dark web when I was a kid to find that. Let alone there's like in the movie theaters, you're seeing like anime movie releases. They're getting nominated for awards. It's wild. Crazy times. Cool times, but wild. Right? Yeah, it's crazy. Like wrestling on ESPN now. I mean, I don't like that you got to pay $29.99 a month again. I thought we were past that. I missed the network. But other than that, like seeing Stephen A. Smith talk about pro wrestling on First Take, like on ESPN, that's crazy. Yeah, I never would have thought that would be a thing back in the day. So I'd say we're definitely in unprecedented times for wrestling. And I'm still here. I'm still a fan. And it's so wild to me to see the highs and lows. It's very interesting. Now, people even older than me, in their 40s and 50s, who maybe grew up in the 80s, like the Hogan era, then they can speak to this just as much as I can, because they lived more through the peak of the, WrestleMania, Hulkamania running wild era, through the new generation where business was bad across the board for all wrestling, but in particular WWF wrestling was really down. Not that some good didn't come from it. Of course, you got Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, Diesel. But like the product was again really cartoony, and we're starting to see a theme here, right? It's when the writing is poor, when you're appealing to. It's different for everybody, right? Because I was gonna say when you're appealing to kids, the product is down, but not to kids. They're just not appealing to you anymore, right? That's the problem. That reminds me, during the Ruthless Aggression era, I was super into John Cena and Batista. What kid wasn't, right? I was in middle school at this point. But I would go to live events, and there would be a lot of adults booing John Cena and Batista. And as a kid, I'm thinking, what? No, you're booing the wrong guy. Why? Don't boo these guys. Boo Triple H, Boo JBL. But John Cena and Batista weren't being marketed to the adults. They were being marketed to me. Because as you age as a wrestling fan, your tastes age as well. When I was a kid, I was all about the sizzle. Didn't care about the steak. I wanted the cool entrances, the cool attire, the cool promos. That's why Cena and Batista, they were my guys, But then you get older and you get a little snobbish and you're like, I care about work rate and move sets and stuff like that. And to be honest, I'm still kind of like that to some degree. But it comes full circle, because I've gotten older now and I appreciate both. I appreciate the sizzle and the steak. Nowadays, I like moves to look real, It's like when I was a kid, I was always Shawn Michaels over Bret Hart, which is stupid. You shouldn't have to pick one or the other. But I liked Shawn because he was all sizzle. Don't get me wrong, he was steak. That guy could work, obviously. He's probably the greatest of all time in ring, right? But his work style was very different from Bret's, in the sense where every single thing Bret did looked like a shoot, like the way he threw punches, the way he kicked, the way he took bumps, back bumps, the way he took turnbuckle bumps was unlike anyone else to this day. He took great pride, and everything he did looked real, like him dropping the forearm off the top rope. It looked like he was hitting his opponent in the forehead, like every single time. And that's the kind of wrestling I appreciate now. But as a kid, I liked seeing Shawn Michaels do the moonsaults and, tuning up the band and kipping up and taking his ridiculous bumps over the top rope and stuff. You can like both. You can like both, man. And as I've aged, I've seen so many different, I guess, wrestling styles. Lucha Libre, just brawling style. I love people like Sheamus and Gunther, who just really lay that ish in, with the chops. I love it all so much. And I've never been one of those wrestling fans that are stuck in the past. I've always moved with the product. I've always kept up with it. Because I'll always have the past. It'll always be there. I have a stack I have a stack right here of just old DVDs and VHS tapes even that I can always go back to if the network or whatever Netflix ever goes to. By the way, Netflix, if you're watching this, any bigwigs at Netflix, please, with the Raw Vault, can we get it going here? Because we're missing over half of the Raws, which we had on Peacock and the network before that. Why entire years of Monday Night Raw are missing? I mean, come on, let's get on with it. It's been enough time already. But anyways, sorry, little angry rant there. I have always kept up with the times because I always have the past. I appreciate it for what it is, and I try not to compare it to the present. I try to just enjoy the present for what it is. I really like the product today. I do. I still do. And I'm excited to see where we go in the future. I'm always going to have the past. We're always going to have the Attitude Era. There'll never be another, and that's okay. You don't want there to be another, because then the Attitude Era wouldn't be so special. What makes it special was that it was so unique. It burned hot. It burned bright, but it was short. It was a brief period. But today's day and age is still good. It's new, and we're in uncharted territory, but I like it. And I hope you guys do too. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts about the past, the present, and the future of wrestling. Are you guys in your 30s as well watching this? Are you a younger fan? Because even fans in their 20s have seen the business evolve so much over that time period. And like I said, people in their 40s, they've seen it even more than I have. But yeah, man, I love wrestling. And I can't imagine a time that I'll ever not love wrestling. I'm just always going to love it. And I have a son of my own now, and my dad, obviously, I talked about at the beginning of this video. He's the one that introduced me to wrestling, and he was a psychotic wrestling fan, just like I am, a huge mark. And so I'll never force anything on my kid, but by proxy, he's going to notice his dad always having wrestling on in the background, always doing wrestling content and playing games of wrestling. I mean, look, for crying out loud, look at this shelf behind me. Look at this. The kid's going to get exposed to wrestling one way or another. And I'm of the belief that people who don't like wrestling have just never really given it a fair shot, Because what's not to like? I have friends who have gotten into wrestling later in life. I'm talking like in their 20s. Have gotten into it in their 20s. Because it's cool, man. It's like real life... superheroes come to life every week. These larger-than-life personalities clashing good and evil. It's, it's like a comic book on screen. Live action every week. It's cool. Every single week. That's another big thing, man. These wrestlers, they're like actors on a TV show, but there's no off-season. You grow up with these people, and they play the same role on that TV show for decades sometimes. And so you feel like a connection with these actors, right? These characters on this TV show. This is where wrestling varies from, just a regular TV show. Is like John Cena, the reason why his last run is so emotional to me is because I really grew up with this guy. I grew up loving him. I grew up, as I became a Smarky fan, hating him. And then it came full circle. He really, with the U.S. Open challenge he was doing, he really won me back during those defenses, putting over young talent. And yeah, man, I'm gonna miss him. And on like Game of Thrones, for example, if a character gets killed off you really like, you're like, oh, I'm gonna miss him. That was or her. She was a good character. But you don't have as much time invested in a character in a show like that will take months or even years off in between seasons. Whereas, wrestling's different, man. You really get behind these characters. You invest so much time and passion into them. And so, especially in the case of John Cena, somebody you've been watching for decades of your life, literally, to see them never reprise that role in that capacity again, it's emotional, man. I made a video one time a long time ago about Eddie Guerrero's passing and what that meant at the time as a kid. It was a huge blow. I felt like I lost a family member. I'll never forget our teacher at the beginning of class, he addressed it. He addressed it in front of his whole class before anything happened, right when the bell rang. He said, all right, a lot of you know because we were all clamoring. You could tell everyone was in distress. I went to a predominantly Hispanic school at the time too, so that's probably worth noting in Chicago. And the teacher said, Eddie Guerrero, WWE superstar, passed away. He didn't die from a match or anything like that, but he passed away, and it's not a storyline or anything. This teacher was like breaking down the death of a pro wrestler, like explaining it to these kids and trying to like settle us down about it because we were all distraught. It sucked because Eddie felt like a part of all of our families. You know, he came into our living rooms every single week. Love him or hate him, he was the man, and it really stung. And that's just a connection that you can't get elsewhere. It's what keeps me coming back. It's why I've been a fan for so long, and why, like I said, I will always be a fan of wrestling. And in today's day and age, you know, I've watched TNA back in its heyday, like 2004 to 2008, in my opinion, was like the peak of TNA. And I watched a little WCW too. My first memories of Hulk Hogan were him as a heel, NWO Hogan. So the black and white Hogan was my first memories. And yeah, just seeing promotions rise and fall next to WWE has been crazy. AEW, the whole birth of that. I can't believe it's been like 5 years already of AEW. Maybe even more now. Because they had the All Out and Double or Not. Whatever. It's just been insane to watch that. Like, you have so many different options now, especially with like WWE and AEW each like doing work with side promotions, AAA and CMLL. It's cool, man. And the access we have to wrestling today, oh my God. If I had WWE Network as a kid, I would have never gotten anything done. I would have had no friends because I would have been glued to my TV just watching matches 24/7. It's crazy. And now we have it in our pockets. On your phone, you can watch this stuff. It's crazy. There's something for everybody, no matter what your taste is. You just like in-ring product. You like luchadors. You like, the big prima donnas. There's something for everybody now. It's crazy. And women's wrestling, oh my God, women's wrestling is sensational now. It might be the best part of WWE today, which is insane for somebody like in our 30s who grew up watching wrestling and seeing the women treated as an afterthought or like just treated like really slabs of meat. They were not part of the pro wrestling aspect of it. They were just there to like appease the 18 to 40 demo or whatever, the horny youth. And I'm so glad to see that that's evolved, man, because my girlfriend now likes wrestling, and I don't know if she would if women were objectified like they used to be. As much as I may have been, I was a kid. I was interested in that. I had a subscription to WWE Magazine just for like the diva photo shoots, really. Yeah, sorry, you could see my mind was running back. I gotta find those magazines somewhere. I think I got them still. But anyways, guys, yeah. What's it been like for you? Let me know in the comments. Have you always been a wrestling fan? Did you get into it later in life? That always fascinates me when people find wrestling later. And what about your kids? Are you going to let your kids watch wrestling? I will. Even if we go to a more TV-14 product, which I think we're slowly kind of getting back to. I'll still let my son watch it because I'll just explain to him, this is a TV show, or we'll have that talk when we cross that bridge. But I've ranted long enough, guys. I appreciate you sticking this far in the video. I really do. Leave a like or whatever. Do all the YouTube stuff for me, please. And I'll catch you all next time. Until then, be well and take care. Peace.